Hey everyone, welcome to channel. If you're watching our channel for the first time, please subscribe to channel. So in this video, we are going to discuss about tricky Java interview questions. So basically what will happen is even though you have worked on Java and even though you know the concepts, in the interview, some of the questions will become tricky to answer. And because of these questions, there are chances that you may get rejected in these interviews. So it's better to know how to answer these tricky questions. And with this video, what we'll do is we'll cover from Java 7 to Java 21st all the tricky questions. Even the latest concepts will also be covered in this. So watch till the end, get the benefit out of it. I'm sharing a premium quality and interview material for free in this video. So don't miss to watch till then. Let's get started. So this is the first question. So it asks like, can we create a try block without catch block, just with only finally block? So first by seeing this, what will happen is normally in our day-to-day coding, we create try, catch, and finally. So this will definitely confuse us. So we'll start thinking whether it is possible or not. So many of the times what we'll say is we'll say no, catch is mandatory. Is catch block is mandatory? Let's try to understand this in detail. So I've taken that example here, a try and finally block. So basically, what will happen is whenever you are creating a try block till Java 7, so it was expecting at least it should contain finally block. So you can skip the catch block, but it should contain finally block. Finally block was mainly designed to clean up things. But if you ask me like, can we just create try catch without finally block? Yes, it is doable, but normally finally was added to basically clean up the resources which are created in the try block. So I'll reiterate. So one more question can be asked is, can we create only try catch and finally is it mandatory? No, finally block is not mandatory. But let's say if you're creating a try block without catch, then finally is mandatory. Let's say if I just comment this block, I'll just show you. You will get compilation error. You can see it's showing catch and finally is expected. So I'll just uncomment this. So what you understand is, so whenever you're creating try block, it should ideally contain either finally block or catch block till Java 7. So maybe let's try to execute and see the output. So we got the output. So inside try block and inside finally block. So finally block is executed here. So there can be a follow-up question. So let's say after Java 7, that is Java 8 onwards, is it mandatory to have try with finally or catch block? Answer is no. There is a concept called try with resource. So I'll show you an example here. So you can see here we have created try, but there is no catch block or there is no finally block. So basically this is a try with resource concept. It will only basically handle the finally block concept also. So what will happen here is, so this try with resource will automatically take care of closing the resource. Let's say you have opened this file reader. So what will happen is it will only automatically close the resource once the try block is executed. Previously, what was happening is in order to close the resource, you had to write the finally block, and many people used to mess it. So because of that, it was leading to memory leak. So in order to avoid that, Java has come up with try with resource concept so that if you just write this structure, it will only take care of even the cleanup of the resource also. That is one of the important thing to basically avoid the memory leak in Java code. Let's move on to next question. So answer is it is possible. Let's see the second question. So what we'll do now, we'll try to cover questions related to try catch finally all together once. So the next set of questions are also related to try and finally block related questions only. After that, we'll move on to different kind of questions. And these try and finally block questions, right? These are a bit tricky in nature. So many of the times candidates will tell the wrong answer. So please understand these concepts clearly so that you can answer correctly in your interviews. So let's move on to the next question. So in this question, right, so we have to guess the output of this code. So it has try and finally block. And try we are returning 1 and finally we are returning 2. So what I would advise is pause this video, think about the output, and you can comment that in the comment section. After that, you can resume this video and check what is the output. Okay, let's see the output of this code. So I've taken the same code here. Okay, so what we do here is this. So there is a try and finally block, and then try block, we are just printing, we are inside the try block, we are inside the final block, and we are returning 1 here and returning 2 here, and we are printing the result here. Okay, whatever is getting returned from this method. So many people think when the return statement is in try, right, they think this is the end, so 1 will be returned. But actually what will happen is, as we discussed a little earlier, finally block is designed to basically clean up the resources. So finally block will always be executed. So whatever you are returning from finally, right, that will take a precedence over the try catch. So let's try to run and check the result. So you can see returned values 2, so which is returned from the finally block. So I hope you understood. So normally, let's say when you see a return statement in try and finally, the finally block return will always be executed. And you can ask me a question, is there any time only try will be executed and finally will not be executed? So we have that question also in the list. So we'll move on to that question in a while. So I hope you understood this question. So finally blocks return statement will always be executed. Okay, let's move on to next question. So answer is like it returns to. So because finally block overrides the try block's return value. I hope it's clear. Let's move on to next question. So this is also about finally, as I told, we'll cover all the try and finally related questions together. So here what is happening, so we have this method test, and we are returning from the try, and in finally we are updating something. So this is bit tricky in nature, okay? So let's try to see what is the output here. Okay, so you can see the code snippet which is in the question here. I have just added an update statement here. So what we are doing here is, this is a int method, and it has a variable called x which is assigned to 0, and we are updating x equals to 1 here and x equals to 2 here, and we are returning x. So many people think by seeing the previous question answer, here x may be 2, but the behavior is bit different here. So what will happen is, if you update some attribute, right, in the try block, and you are returning here only, there is no return statement from family. That is one thing you have to observe clearly. So because you are updating x1 here and returning from here only, we are trying to update here. But what will happen is, this x equals to 1 is stored in the stack memory. So this x equals to 2 will not take into account. So x equals to 2, whatever the assignment we are making, it will not take into precedence. So I hope you understood. So there is no return statement from finally. So we are updating and try, and we are returning there only. And we have finally block where we are trying to change the value of x to 2. So let's see the response. So you can see answer is 1, as I already told you. So in try there is an update happening. So that is stored in the stack memory. Even though we are updating something in finally, it will not be considered. Let's say if there is a return statement here, then it works differently. Finally, a return will take a precedence over the try return statement. So if I run now, you will get answer as 2. So I hope you got the difference. So let's say if I remove this, right, what is happening is, we are returning from the try only. So that will take a precedence. Even though we are changing something and finally, that will not take a precedence. But if you add return statement inside the finally, then that will take a precedence. I hope you understood the difference. It is a bit tricky in nature. What I would recommend is, go and practice this question so you'll understand how it is working. Let's move on to the next question. So as we discussed, right, the answer is 0 here. In my example, I just updated the x equals to 1, but here it's like whatever returning the value from try, right, that will take a precedence. The concept is same. So you can see finally return value remains 0 only, even though x is changed later, because like the final return value remains 0 only, even though x is changed in the finally block. As we discussed, like try and return is already done, and that value is already stored in the stack. So try there is a return statement that is already stored in the stack that will take a precedence over the whatever the update we are doing in the finally. Let's move on to next question. So the question is it allowed to have such kind of try catch block? Let's see whether it works or not. So basically here, if you see, right, I've just tried to mimic the similar one. So here we have some try catch, innermost try catch, and there is an outer try catch. So it's perfectly fine. I can run and show you. So you can see it is running fine, and we are seeing both the exceptions. So inner try catch is handling this arithmetic exception, and outer one is handling array index out of one exception. So this is just a demonstration purpose I've written. So basically in the innermost try catch, you can have some specific exceptions. So, but yeah, this is perfectly allowed. But normally we use one level of try catch only. Nested try catch are not often used. So let's see the answer. So, so answer is also same thing. Nested try catch blocks are allowed. So it is used to handle the different exceptions at different levels of granularity. So let's move on to next question. Okay. So when finally block will not be executed, this is one concept we discussed a little earlier also. So because we saw when we put return statement in try and finally, the finally will always be executed. And we even saw an example where we try to update the value of a variable in finally block. So basically finally is used to kind of clean up all the open resources. So it will always be executed. But is there any case, is there any exception for that? Like, is there any case where finally will not be executed? But in general, in normal programming world, right? So finally will always be executed. So, but let's take one exceptional case where it will not be executed with an example we can see. So let's try to understand when finally will not be executed. Normally, as I said, no, in our day-to-day work, finally will always be executed if we use try and finally combination. But this is an exceptional case. This is just for interview purpose. So we don't use system.exit in our code because it will exit the code. So it is not recommended. So let's try to run this. So here you can see the finally is not executed. So you don't see finally printed in the response. So this is the only case where finally will not be executed. I hope you understood. So basically answer is same thing. If try or catch block contains system.exit, then finally will not be executed. So you understood, right? If try or catch contains system.exit, so finally block will not be executed because system.exit means that is an end. So no further execution happens. So that's when finally will not be executed. Let's move on to next question. So what is the difference between final, finally, and finalize? There are three different keywords. It sounds similar, but it is different. So what is the difference between final, finally, and finalize in Java? Let's see the answer. Final, basically, it can be used with either variables or it can be used with methods or it can be used with class. So if you use final with the variable, it will become constant. Let's say final int a is equals to 5. So you can't change a's value to any other thing because it's a constant. Same thing with method. Final, some method we are using. So that can't be overridden in the child class. So in case of class level final, what will happen is the class can't be inherited. So that is the usage of final. Finally is basically used with try catch combination or it can be used with try also. So it's regardless of whether exception is thrown in the try, it will be executed. It is mainly used to basically kind of release the resources or close the open resources in the try block. And finalize is basically it is called by garbage collector before an object is removed from the memory. So I hope you got the difference. Let's move on to next question. So the question is simple here. We have an array list and we are trying to remove the element in the array list. So let's try to see how it works. Let's go to the ID and let's try to understand more about this. So let's try to run and understand this code. Okay, so what we are doing is we are basically having a list of type array list, and we are iterating over the array list, and we are removing the element from the array list. So this is what we are doing. So basically, when you try to run this, right, you will get concurrent modification exception. So it- by when we see this code, it looks like it will work, but it will not work mainly because so expectation is whenever you are iterating over uh, this collection like list, right? So if you try to modify the structure of the list, so it will throw concurrent modification exception. Let's say if I do add here and try to run it, I'll get the same exception because we are modifying when we are iterating. So internally what will happen is it will check whether there is any structural modification. Structural modification means, let's say the list initially contains size 3, for example. If you are trying to add extra, remove extra, it will change the count of it. So which leads to concurrent modification exception. So whenever you want to remove something from the list, what you can do is, I'll just show you a simple example. So let's say I want to remove some entry. Okay, so just to make it simple, let's say I want to remove B. So how I can do efficiently without getting this concurrent modification exception, let's try to understand. So first thing is you have to take the iterator. Okay, so you can say it's a list iterator. So that's one of the important thing. Um, I'll go with iterator only. There is a special variant for list also, but I'll just go with a normal iterator. So what you have to do is you can say while list iterator. So we have to check has next. That will check whether there is any there is next element or not. So we'll take the element here. Let's say list iterator dot next, so which will give the element. So let's say I want to remove. Okay, just one change is required is you have to mention type of the iterator. Otherwise, what will happen is when you do next, it will return object and you can't assign it to string. Either you have to typecast here, but the best thing is specifying that while creating the iterator itself. So you got the element. So let's say now if I have to remove element is equals to for example B. So if I have to remove B, what I'll do is I'll just go to this list iterator and I'll just to remove. So it will remove that entry. Okay. And if I have to see the entries after the iteration, right, I'll just print the list. Let's see whether it will work or not. So you can see it has modified or removed B, and it has basically, I mean, we can see the result here. So this is how you can modify or basically remove the entry. So I hope you understood how you can remove some entry from the list. So let's move on to the next question. So let's see the next question. So the next question is, can we have a switch statement with null as a key? So can we have a switch statement which uses null as one of the case value? Is it allowed or not? So this is a bit tricky question, okay? Because still certain Java versions, the behavior is different, and after that it has changed. So I'll try to run using my ID. I'm using Java 21 as my version. So let's see how it works. So you can see like I have a switch statement with case as null and I'm passing null as the value also. So when I try to run it, so I'm getting null value. So basically I'm using a JDK 22 version. So, but let's say if I change this to previous version. Let's say I have just set to version 11 here. So let's try to understand the behavior. Okay, so I've taken the example here. So this is a test method. It contains a switch condition with cases as null and default. So I'm using Java version 11 here just to demonstrate this behavior. So I'm running this code. So basically, I'm getting an error saying Java will not support null in switch cases in version 11. So it's clearly saying use version 21 or more, then you will get support for null. So let's say if I change this version to 21 and if I try to run the same code, it will basically work. It will, I mean, input. So it will basically print the null value and even default value. So as I told in the beginning of this video, we will cover some of the concepts till Java 21 and 22 also. So none of the existing tutorials will give you such an extensive coverage on the questions which can be asked in interview. So without miss, please watch till the end, like this video and share your thoughts in the comment. So I hope you understood this question. So till Java 21, null will not be supported as a case value, but Java 21 onwards it will support. But in Java 17, you can enable this as a preview feature. So that's another thing. Uh, so both you should know, like in Java 17, you can enable this as a preview feature, and Java 21 onwards, it is supported by default. So that is the answer for this question. So let's see the next question. So question says like, can you override a private method in subclass? So first you have to understand private access modifier. So what it says is like something, let's say if it is a method or a variable declared as private, it can be accessed only within the same class. So normally it can be accessed by other methods in the same class. So if I have another method in the parent, right? So that can access the print method. So child, which is extending this parent class. Let's try to see the next question. So question is like, can we override a private method in a subclass? Let's try to understand this in detail by running this code in our IDE. So here if you see, right, I have a base class and I have a derived class. So I have a function method, it's from base, and I'm trying to override here and I'm trying to call that method. So you can see I'm getting an error saying fun is a private access in the base. So what does it mean is whatever we declared right here, the function is of type private. Private means its visibility is restricted to just that class. Only the methods in that class can access, not visible outside of that class. So none of the other class can override it. So I hope you understood. So if you try to override a private method, so you will basically, it's not allowed. It's a compilation error. If you try to call this, right, you are seeing compilation error. You can't override the private method of base class in the derived class. So because of this access modifier. So answer is like you can't override because of the visibility. So it's not accessible outside of the class. Let's go to the next question. So question is like, can a class implement two interfaces that have methods with same name? So this question is a bit abstract. Okay, this has multiple variants. We'll try to understand all the different variants. Just before we go there, right, just one thing I would like to say is whatever the content you're getting, this is like a premium content. So you will get only this in paid courses. So I'm giving it for free. So watch this video till the end and please like and subscribe to the channel, as well as please share your thoughts in the comment. So that will encourage us to create some more content. So let's move on to the answer for this. So as I said, there are three different variants. We'll try to understand different variants and its answers also. Let's try to understand the first variant. So here, if you see there is an interface A, interface B, this class is extending both, and both
of these interface methods are having same name and same signature, like both are returning void. So you have to override it. Okay, let's say if I comment this method, right? So you can't simply implement it. You have to override it because both are abstract methods. I mean, one way is you can make this class as abstract, then it will work. Okay. But if you are having a concrete class, then you have to override the methods. So JVM will get to know like how it needs to be handled. So this is pretty clear. So you can have two interface with same method names, and what you have to do is in order to make it work, you have to override that in the concrete class. So this is the one variant. Let's try to understand the second variant. So let's say if the let's try to understand the second variant. Let's say if two interfaces contains same method names, but return is different, return type is different, signature is different. So in this case, right, you can't implement. So you can see both of them are having two different signatures. So you can't override also. So this will not work. Either one way is you have to fix these interfaces, or you have to implement one of the interface. You can't implement both the interface here. So this is another variant of a question. There is third variant also. Let's try to understand that. So this is a third variant of a question. So here, right, we are having default methods. So even the interface one contains this one, and interface two also contains same method, same signature, but it's a default. There's already implementation. But let's say if you say I don't override it, so you will get compilation error. So you have to override it. But when you override, right? So if you have to pick up some behavior, like you don't need to add the implementation, you want to pick up something existing only, then what you can do is you can take this interface, use super, and call the methods. So here I'm calling interface once method. So same thing you can do interface two also. Just you have to specify ib.super.method. That's it. So this is how you can handle interfaces with same method names if a class is implementing interfaces with same method name. This is how you can handle. I hope you understood different variants. I hope you'll definitely appreciate this because nobody will give you this depth of variance and what you have to do in each of these cases. So let's move on to next question. So answer we have already discussed. As long as methods have same signature, the implementing class needs to provide only one implementation for both the interface. So we understood. So let's move on to the next question. So let's see the question. So question is like, what happens if you call wait outside a synchronized block? So this is an interesting question. So let's try to understand this with an example. Okay, let's see the example here. So here I have a class, and in that what I'm doing is just I'm having a try catch block and I've created an object. I'm waiting on the object here. So let's try to run this. So basically, when you try to run wait outside of synchronized block, you will get illegal monitor state exception. What does it mean? So it's saying current thread is not a owner. So what wait does we have to understand? Wait is used to release the lock. So to release the lock, right, thread should have the lock on the object. Then only it can release the lock. So basically, wait expects something called monitor. Monitor is nothing but kind of a lock on the object. Wait is used to release the lock. So as a prerequisite, thread should hold the lock on the object. Then only wait can release it. So here we are not taking the lock itself. So we are trying to release it. So that's why we are getting illegal monitor state exception. So how to fix it? So so in order to fix it, what we have to do is we have to take the lock on the object. I have used synchronized here. So now if I run it, it should work fine because
We have taken the lock and we are releasing here. So I hope you understood. So basically, wait we can't call without synchronization because there should be lock acquired that can be released using wait. So let's move on to next question. So answer we have already discussed. So we'll get illegal monitor state exception. So next question is how to handle multiple exceptions in single block. Let's try to understand this with an example. So the question is how to handle multiple exceptions in a single block. So basically here you can see, right, we have an arithmetic exception, we have SQL exception. So we have corresponding print stack trace. So efficient way is like if you're using an ID like IntelliJ, right, that itself will suggest. So we can collapse this into one catch block. So you can just take the suggestion. So we have to basically use pipe symbol between different exceptions, and here you can mention like lock statement to print the exceptions. So always recommendation is don't use e dot print stack trace. Instead, add a lock statement and extract what is required from the exception instead of printing the entire stack trace. I hope you understood how you can handle multiple exceptions in a single catch block efficiently. But let's say your requirement is each exception should be logged in a different way, for example. Then I think it's better to go with multiple catch block. Otherwise, you have to have some if else checks inside the catch block. So yeah, let's move on to next question. So answer we got to know like we have to use pipe symbol and we can log the exceptions after that. Let's move on to next question. So can a class have two main methods? That's a good question. Let's try to understand with an example. So let us try to understand the question with an example. So what question is asking is, can we have a class with two main methods? So I've created a similar example. So here I've created two main methods. One is taking string array as argument, another is taking integer array as argument. So let's try to understand the question. So basically, what question is asking is, can we have a class with two main methods? So normally what will happen is in our day-to-day work, we'll always create one main method. So we'll think only one main method is allowed. But let's say if the interviewer asks, can we have two main methods? So that will confuse many people. They'll think, oh, it may not be, it may violate something. There may be compilation issue. Definitely, it will not lead to any issues. It is perfectly allowed. It is just an overloading functionality. If you see here, right, I have a main with string args and another main with integer args. But what will happen is JVM, when you run this class, it will always look for public static void main string array arguments. So it will call that method only. So other main method is just like another static method. So you can call from main. So JVM will not call that. Let's say if I run this class, so you'll get to know. It will print inside main with string args. I hope you understood. So basically it is just a static method overloading. So you can have two main methods and it can have a different signature. So JVM will call only this public static void main. This is an entry for all the executions. I hope you understood clearly. Let's move on to next question. So answer is it's perfectly allowed. Let's move on to next question. So can we override static method? We just discussed the overload functionality. So basically overloading is possible. Can we override the static method? That's a good question. Let's try to understand with example. So let's try to understand the question. So question says is, can we override the static method? So first you have to understand a bit about static. Static is bound to a class. It is not bound to any object. Okay, so static method is kind of bound to a class at the compile time itself. Overriding is a dynamic behavior. So it happens at the runtime. Okay, these two things you have to understand. So basically,
So you can't override the static method because the static method is just visible within this class only. It is not basically available to the other classes to override it. So what I have done is I have taken the static method here as well as in the child also. I've taken normal method also just to show the difference. So what I'm doing is I have created a parent object which is pointing to the child class. Okay. So I'm calling p dot static method. So ideally what will happen is it should call the child's static method if the method is overridden. So that's why I'm calling even p dot add also just to show the difference. So when I run this code, right, you can see it is printing the parent static method. So this static method is printing the parent static method, not the child static method. But this add method, if you see, this add method is printing the child's add method, not the parent's add method. I hope you understood. So I'm just showing an example one more time. So I have the static methods and I have a non-static method. I'm overriding both just for the demo purpose. But static method can't be overridden when I call this, right? This parent p object is pointing to child. So it should call the child's method since the static method is bound to class, so I'm calling with the parents object, right? It will call parent static method only. It will not call the child's static method. But when I call add is overridden. So that's why it is calling the child's add method. I hope it's clear. So one more time I'm explaining. So basically you can't override the static method because static method is bound to a class. So it is kind of resolved at the compile time itself. So overriding is a runtime behavior. At runtime, basically that resolution happens, whether it has to call the parents or child class. So you can't override the static method. You can overload the static method, which is perfectly fine. So let's see the answer. So basically static methods cannot be overridden because it's like a class level method. It's bound to a class. It's not tied to any specific instance. So you can't override. So only you can override if it is tied to an instance. Instance level methods can be overridden. That is nothing but non-static methods. So let's move on to next question. Let's move on to next question. So what is the difference between error and exception? This is one thing we normally see in our code, but we will not be aware of all the differences. Let's try to understand all the difference. Font is bit small, but I'll explain all the differences in detail. So basically both errors and exceptions they are the subclass of throwable. Throwable is a parent class. So errors and exceptions are from throwable only. That's the common thing. So let's try to understand the different things like how it is originated, how is recoverability, types and handling and predictability. So basically errors typically occur when there is like system level issues happens, which is beyond our program's control. Let's say out of memory exceptions or stack overflow or some hardware failure. In case of exceptions, they arise like within the application code itself due to some like for example IO exception, null pointer. So it's within the application code itself. So recoverability, right? In case of error, so it's like unrecoverable, like attempting to catch or handle that will not add any value. Only for logging purpose we can do it, but it's not recommended. But in case of exceptions, we can basically recover, like we can have the proper try catch blocks, we can catch it, we can handle it gracefully. And all the errors are unchecked and it extends the error class. So unchecked means it's a runtime behavior. So in case of exceptions, it can be checked, that is at the compile time. It can be unchecked, which occur at the runtime. So both extends the exception class. And last 2 points like handling and predictability. So it's like as we discussed, we don't need to catch this errors. So program will terminate normally. And in a case of exceptions, yes, we can be like it can be caught, it can be handled gracefully. So errors are unpredictable. It's as we discussed, it's out of application's control. Exceptions can be anticipated. That's why there are
like checked exceptions. In case of unchecked also, we can predict. For example, array index auto bound. We can have proper checks to avoid that. So I hope you understood the difference between error and exceptions here. Let's move on to next question. So do you know the different garbage collector algorithm which is supported by JVM? So normally, right, even though like we know garbage collection is used by Java and it is used to basically clear the memory, all those things we know, but not many people know about different garbage collector which is available also. So, so these are all the available garbage collector: serial, parallel, concurrent mark and sweep, G1, and Z or Z garbage collector, and there are last two, Shenandoah garbage collector and Epsilon garbage collector. So these are all the different garbage collector. So G1 is like a default garbage collector. I hope you understood different garbage collector. Let's move on to next question. So question is like, what are the different ways to create the singleton class? So first see the ways and after that I'll show with an example. So there is an eager based initialization, lazy initialization, and these two are thread safe singleton creation, and this is a build singleton creation using inner static class, and this is enum based singleton creation. Let's try to understand all this in detail. Let's try to see the pros and cons of these things. Yeah, before we go for a example, let's try to understand what is singleton. So singleton means you will create only one instance of that class and you will use the same instance throughout your code. So that is called singleton. So how many ways we can create singleton, we'll understand with examples. So in eager initialization, what is happening is, if you see, there is a private static final and we are creating an instance here. And this constructor is private, so nobody can call this. So to get the instance, they can call this getInstance method. Since it is private static final, it's like only once it is created. So rest of the time, like other classes can use this. Okay. And the advantage is like it is created during the class loading itself. That is the advantage. Disadvantage is, let's say this class has a lot of dependencies. Like for example, it has to open some connections or it has to open some file handlers. So if the class creation itself is complex, then if you make it as eager, then what will happen is the class creation will take a lot of time. Let's say if there is an immediate need, it makes sense. But let's say that class is not immediately needed at all, then there is no point in creating a singleton class eagerly. So what you can do is you can go for lazy initialization. So in case of lazy initialization, so this get instance is called only when there is a need of this class. So you hope I understood. So when you need the singleton class, then only you will call the get instance. So here what we are doing is, here we are checking instance is null, like instance is not created. Then only we are initializing and returning the instance. I'll explain one more time. So get instance is called, inside we are checking whether this instance is null, means it is not created already. Then what we are doing is we are calling the constructor. So I hope you know, like within the class, a method can call a private constructor, but during the object creation, we can't call the private constructor from outside of this. So from main, we can't call this. Only like a static method call this and can create this instance of it. Okay. And do you see, is it a best approach? Definitely not. There are some negatives also. Main problem is, let's say you are working on a multi-threaded code. So in that case, what will happen is, if let's say if two threads are trying to get instance, so both the threads are coming here, they are checking, okay, it's null, then they'll create two instances of it. So that's a side effect or drawback of lazy initialization without thread safety. So how we can make it thread safe? So let's go to thread safe singleton. Here what we have done is we have introduced a synchronized at the method level. Basically we are locking this method. So when one thread is inside this method, other thread has to wait. So basically
get instance is called, one thread will come inside, it will check all these things and create. If other thread wants to instance, so it will wait, and once the lock is released, it will come here. So by the time the first thread has already created the object, so it will just get this instance. So with this way, you can avoid the thread issues. But is it the best approach? No, because we are taking the synchronized at the method level. So what is the best approach? So we can go for double checked locking. So we are not taking synchronized at the method level, it's a block level synchronization. As you always know, in synchronization, like you can have method level and block level synchronization. Recommended is to go for block level synchronization because only that particular block is locked. Otherwise, if you use method level, the entire method itself is locked. So here we are taking lock on this class. So this is one thing you should understand. So since it's a static method, we can take lock only on the class, not on the object, because static can't access any object. And here what we are doing is we are checking instance is null, and synchronize we are doing at the class level. After that, we are again checking instance is null and we are creating. So you can ask me why this double check happening. This is called as double check locking. So you can ask why double check is required. Let's say both the threads are inside. Okay. So instance is equals to null. So till here, both the threads can come. So here, after only one thread can go inside. Okay. So let's say both the threads came here and they saw instance is null and one thread went inside. Let's say if there is no instance equals to null, what will happen is one thread, like just for example, I'll just comment this line just for. So let's say one thread, I mean, both the threads here, and one thread went inside and created the instance, and they got the instance. For other thread also, this check is already done. Instance is null. So they will just go inside, they'll create again. So that's why we need a double check. So even though there is a check outside, inside also we have to check if it is created by another thread. If so, then just return this instance. I hope it's clear for you why double check is required. But if you ask me whether this double check is also safe, no, there are issues with it. Even Java will also not fully recommend this. So one of the preferred way to create a singleton is using enum. So enum singleton. So you can have this instance directly. And when you want the singleton, you can just call this. So this will give you the singleton instance. So this is one of the recommended singleton instance. So if not, what you can do is you can go for basically this one thread safe. This is a simple one. You will just take the lock at the method level. But if you need more control, then you can go for double checked locking singleton also. So these are all the different ways you can create the singleton. There is another one, which is the last one I missed. So basically it's a static inner class you'll create. This is the outer class, private constructor. What we'll do is we have created an inner class. So within inside, we are creating this. And what we are doing is when somebody wants to get this instance, they can call this. So this is another way to basically create the singleton. So it's a inner class based singleton creation. But here also I feel it's same as almost like an eager one, since it is a static, which will be kind of loaded at the class creation itself. So, but this is another variant. So I hope you understood different ways to create the singleton instance. Eager, lazy, thread safe, double check, Pelpag, and enum based singleton creation we understood. So normally people go for enum for simple one, but let's say if there is bit complex, you can go for either thread safe and double checked. So even double check has its own issues. If you want, you can go through a Java documentation to understand more. But if you need answer from mine, you can just comment. I can explain. So let's move on to next question. Is singleton is a thread safe? That's another interesting question. So normally what will happen is we'll create singleton, use the object across all the places, like single object across all the places. But if somebody asks you, is it thread safe? It depends. So I'd say inherently singleton is not a thread safe, as we discussed, right? The initial version when we saw it was not thread safe, but you can make it thread safe. So that's why it is mentioned here. Like inherently, by default, singleton is not thread safe. But let's say, but if you let's say go for example, uh, eager based initialization, it is thread safe. Enum based, it's a thread safe one. The bullbug method which we discussed, that is also thread safe. But if it is, for example, if you are using lazy, it is not thread safe. You have to basically use some kind of uh, thread handling mechanisms. So if somebody asks you, is singleton thread safe? It depends on the implementation. There is no generic answer. If it is default one, lazy one, yes, it is not thread safe, but you can make it thread safe by using different mechanisms. So if it is a lazy one, it is not, but if it is created using other mechanisms, it can be thread safe. Let's move on to next question. So is hash map classes thread safe? So that's an interesting one. So we use hash map, one of the famous collection type in our day-to-day work. But is it thread safe? Answer is no. Hash map is not thread safe. So if multiple threads updates, right, we will not get the desired result. So basically, hash map is not thread safe. Multiple threads can access and modify it. So what is the variant which is thread safe? If somebody asks you, one is concurrent hash map, that is thread safe, or you can go for synchronized hash map, that is also thread safe. The third one is you can make the whole map as synchronized. There's a method in collection by using which you can make the map thread safe. So basically, the third one is like we are synchronizing explicitly the whole map. So maybe I can show you with an example. So I was talking about third variant, that is, let's say you have already created a map. Is it possible to make it thread safe? Yes, by using this synchronized map, you can make it as thread safe, which is fine, which is possible. Same thing like in case of synchronize, right? It's not just with map. So if you want to see, you can make it as the whole collection or list set. So there are multiple variants. So you can use this to basically make the map thread safe. Okay. So by default, hash map is not thread safe. So only two variants are thread safe. That is, let's go to next question. What is the difference between concurrent hash map and synchronized hash map? So both are thread safe, which we know already. Is there any other difference? So in case of synchronized hash map, it's like one lock on the entire map. That means only one thread at a time can go and update the synchronous hash map, which is not efficient. It will degrade the performance actually. In case of high concurrent systems, right, it is not recommended. It's because the whole map is blocked. Only one can go inside and update and come back. But in case of concurrent hash map, what will happen is internally the concurrent hash map is divided into buckets. Okay, so there will be basically 16 buckets by default. So 16 threads at a time can go and modify the concurrent hash map. So which is performant in nature, which is recommended in case of high concurrency environment because it will not block the entire map. I hope you understood. In case of synchronized hash map, it will block the entire map. Only one thread can access and update at a time. In case of concurrent hash map, multiple threads can go and update without causing any thread issues. So let's move on to next question. So can hash map contains key as null or value as null? So this is an interesting one because what will happen is we use hash map in our day-to-day work, but still we'll not be aware whether we can store the null key, null value. So let's try to understand with an example. So let's try to understand with an example. So here what I've done, right? I've added four entries: null value, non-null. So here I have added null key, non-null value, non-null key, null value, and again a null key and non-null value, and this is a general one, both are non-null. So let's try to run and understand. So you can see it has taken the null key and null value also. So let's say if I have to store null value for key 2, for example, This is perfectly allowed. You can see key 2 is also having null in the output, and key 1 is also having null, and there is only one null key. So let's try to understand this in detail. So hash map can contain only one null key, okay? Because if you add one more, what will happen is it will just override the existing one, okay? And how this null key works, that we have to understand, because we may say, okay, null key is allowed, but if you don't know how it is working, then interviewer will ask you further. And this is even for your understanding also. So null key, which means internally when we are storing, it has to go to the buckets to store these details. So for that, it has to get the hash code. Null key's hash code is 0, so it will go and sit in the 0th bucket, okay, and it will store the corresponding value. So people say like there can be only one null key is possible, because if you add one more time, right, it'll just go and replace it. So if you see here, here I had like value for null key, and here I had value for null key, null 2 key. So but in the output, right, I hope you observed clearly what has happened is only the second one is present. So in the output, right, you can see null. So for null key, only value for null 2 key is present. So it has overridden the first one. Okay. So I hope you understood clearly. You can store only one null key in hash map and any number of null values. So we saw like even for key 1 was also null and key 2 was also null, that we saw in the response, which is perfectly fine. You can see this. I hope you understood clearly. Let's say interviewer extended this question. So you know about hash map, that's well and good. But let's say if there is a tree map with a string key and string value, and I'll just create the tree map here. So question is same. Question is same. Can we have tree map with null key? So I'll just take this all together. Just update the object name. So can we have tree map with null key? So just for information, whatever we discussed for hash map, right? Same concept will not holds good for tree map, because in case of tree map, it will basically maintain the order of insertion. To manage that, internally it uses comparator and compare to method. So when you store null as a key, and let's say if I run this, what will happen is I'll get null pointer exception. You can see this. But but let's say you are using some custom object. So instead of string here, I'm using, for example, I'm an employee as me key. Then I can have null keys, provided whenever I'm overriding the compare to method, if I take care of the null checks, then I can store null as a key. I'll repeat one more time. So tree map with maybe built-in classes, it will throw null pointer exception for null key, because it in turn uses compare to method and it expects non-null keys. But let's say if it is custom class and you have handled the null checks within the compare to methods, then it is perfectly allowed to use the null keys. I hope you understood clearly the difference. So let's try to understand. Let's try to see the next question. So can we run Java application without main method? See the answer. Before Java 7, yes, it was possible with static block, but after Java 7, main method is compulsory. So I hope you understood. Before Java 7, yes, with just static block you can execute it, but after Java 7, main method is compulsory. So we can try to see with an example also. So here you can see, right, I've just created a static block. There is no run option only. So it expects the method, so it expects main method. So which means like we need main method. Let's say if I add main method here, so now you can see I'm getting run option. So just with static block, it is not allowed after Java 7. I hope it's clear for you. Let's move on to the next question. Let's try to see the next question. So how do sealed classes improve Java's inheritance model? So the sealed classes is like introduced in Java 17, and after that it is present in all the versions. So let's try to understand the sealed class with an example. So let's try to understand the sealed class in detail. So I have created a sealed class called shape, and there is permits. It is permitting circle and square. What it means is sealed class or sealed interface, it is kind of an additional layer on the inheritance. So previously what was happening was, let's say there is non-final class, then any other class was allowed to extend it or allowed to implement the interface. But if it is sealed class or sealed interface, so what it does is it will say, it will mention which classes can extend the sealed class. So here if you see, right, only circle and square can extend shape. So there is a method here called area. So here you can see circle is extending shape, which is perfectly allowed, and here square is extending shape, which is perfectly allowed. I tried a rectangle to extend the shape, but if you see, right, rectangle is not allowed in the sealed hierarchy. It is not allowed to extend. So it's like kind of control over your inheritance. Let's say you have to control only few classes can extend your class, so you can have the permits option. And another thing is, so you may get a question. Let's say it's a controlled at the sealed class level, but let's say how about the child class? So class is like, for example, circle is extending shape. So somebody can extend the circle and get the features, right? That question obviously arises. Yes. So there are two variants as possible. Either you can make your class as final, which is extending the sealed class, which means nobody can extend circle. So you are basically controlling the further inheritance. But let's say you are allowed, you want to allow. So you can have non-sealed as your keyword. So which means the square can be extended by any other class. Let's say if I have to do it, I'll just go and replace this guy. This is allowed. So I hope you understood. Let's say if you want to control the inheritance at the child level also, then either you can make classes final, but if you want to allow the child class to be extended, you can go for non-sealed keyword. So I hope you understood the advantage of sealed class. You can control who can extend your classes. If you use the sealed interface, same thing, who can implement the sealed interface, you can control. So as I told in the beginning of the video also, we will cover some of the advanced topics. None of the existing tutorials will explain you, and we'll cover the advanced topics in the latest version of a Java also. So that's why I would recommend watch this video till the end. So if you need this material, if you need all these questions with some additional questions also, I'll provide, and that link is in the description, and I'll provide in the comment section also. You can check out that. Let's move on to the next question. So we understood like seed class will basically restrict which classes can extend them. It's basically more control over the inheritance. So next question is, can we make constructor private? This we saw a little earlier. Yes, it is possible to make constructor private. Normally in singleton it is used. So I don't think it requires more explanation. So when you make constructor private, you can't create the object of it. So you have to go for some static method to basically invoke the constructor so that you can get the object creation. So normally this is used in singleton object creation. So let's move on to next question. Can we create a class without any methods and fields? This is a good question. So yes, we can create a class, an empty class without any methods or any fields, but it should contain main method at least. Because without main method, you can't use that class. As we discussed a little earlier, main is compulsory after Java 7, so that using that you can create the object. So let's move on to next question. So next question is how to create
an immutable class? So this is one of the very important question. This has been asked in many Java interviews. And immutable objects plays very important role in Java also. So let's try to understand how to create an immutable class, what are the variants, and how you can create with latest Java versions efficiently. So we'll move on to basically our editor to see the example. Cool. So to make any class immutable, right? First of all, you have to make classes final so that no one can extend that. So what is immutability? Basically, you have to understand. So immutable means once the class is created, it can't be modified. So if you modify, it will create a new instance. Take an example of string. So when you create a string, right, and if you want to change or concatenate or something, it will create new string altogether. So that's immutability. So how to create that? As we discussed, like we have to make class final, we have to declare the attributes as private and final, so nobody can change that. And we should initialize all these things in the constructor, and we should not provide any setters, only getters we have to provide. So this is the basic structure of an immutable class. But let's say we have to support, for example, a collection. Like for example, there is a list we have to support. Like for example, private final list of string here, and maybe we can say list string just for the lack of better naming. So how to basically initialize? Let's say if I go same way what I did earlier, like if I initialize this here, and if I declare my getter here, so it's like if I do this, so do you think is it immutable? Like I followed the same instructions, like I have initialized run the constructor and I have provided a getter. So we discussed a little earlier, immutability means once the object is created, it can't be changed. But with this, what will happen is we can change this object. So that is the problem. So why it can be changed? Because this list of string, right? This is not immutable. So this can be changed. You can ask me why. Let's take an example, okay? So let's try to create this immutable collection. Let's let's try to create an object of this class. Uh, let's say we can say immutable, and we can say new immutable. So we have to initialize here. Let's say ID is 1, name is maybe for example hello, and I need a list to pass, so I'll pass list here, list of string. um, so let's say just I'll create one array list, and I'll just add one element. Maybe I can call it as uh, first, okay, and I'll pass this list here, okay, and I'll just print this immutable. So I'll just try to run this. So you can see like hello world, it is printing. Uh, so let's add a toString method here. Um, so because in order to print some object, we need toString. So let's try to run this. Okay, let's try to run this and see. I'll just run this method. So basically it is printing ID equals to 1, name is hello, and list is first. So if I want to change this ID or name, there is no option. I have to create new of something. But can I change this list? Let's see how to do it. So first of all, we are passing list here itself, right? So what can we do is, let's say if I add list of dot, and let's say if I make it second here. Okay, so immutable object is already created. So I'm just trying to modify it. I'll just call this. So you can see first was it is containing id1 hello and first, and now I added second. So that is also created. So what does it mean? When an object is created, if you are able to change it, then it is not immutable. So here it is violating the immutable principle. So let's try to see how to fix it. So basically here, right, if you see, whatever the list of string we are getting, we are assigning as it is. So this can be list here, or this can be any of the class. Let's say I have an employee class here, some other class. Same problem. So I can't force employee class to make it immutable. What I can do is within my immutable class, I should make sure it should not be changed. So one of the way to fix this is, so we have to basically say make new array list of, we can pass this. Okay. Now we can see whether it works or not. Okay. So if you see now I got first and first, no change. Even though I tried to add, I did not change. Do you think is it sufficient? Do you think it is sufficient to make a class immutable? So I'll show you there is one more loophole with this code. What is that? So basically, so there is a get method. I hope you have seen the get method here. So get is basically returning this. So if I make, for example, um, or maybe I'll just take the reuse the same object. So I'll take this immutable. I'll do get operation, get of this list string, and I added it. And let me try to run it. Okay. So now it has changed. If you see, right now it is basically updating it. So just one thing is, I'll just add this print statement just for reference. So it's like before change and after change, you will see clearly. So in the first, it is returning first, and after that, it is returning first and second. So again, it is violating. What can be done? Easiest way is like here also, we have to basically do a deep copy. So deep copy means we are not returning the reference which is stored. We are creating another reference and we are sending. So even though you change that outside, it will not impact the object. So this is very much important. So you can see now there is no change. We are not able to change the list of string. See, understood. So what you have to do is first is you have to do a deep copy of it in the constructor, and you have to basically make that change in the getter also. That is also one of the very much important thing. So we'll think like, is there any way we can create easily without adding all these things, without taking all this hassle? Yes, in Java 14 onwards. So Java introduced a new concept called record. So let's see the record. Okay, so this is a Java record. So let's try to understand how to create an immutable class with Java records. So Java records is one of the concept which is introduced in Java 14 onwards. So by using which you can create an immutable object very easily. So we can avoid a lot of boilerplate code using records. Let's try to see. Here you can see I have created an immutable class. It's very simple. You just need to show the attributes here. That's it. So this is immutable now. So if I have to test it, right, I'll just create this object and I'll show you. So how this immutable works. At each one, maybe I'll call it as first, and I can just print this guy immutable record. That's it. So I'll try to just run this. It has created an immutable object. So if I have to change this, it will create a new object altogether.
let's take another variant as we discussed earlier. Let's say there is a list of strings or some other object which we have to use inside this. How to make that immutable? So it's very simple. So I'll call it as maybe string list, and here I have to basically update that in the constructor. I'll show you how to do that. So it's string list, and there is a method called list dot copy of string list. So this will create an immutable copy of string list. If you hover on this will basically create an immutable or unmodifiable list. Okay, so which is supported from Java 10 onwards. Let's say if I just take this design here and add it here, and I'll just pass the list here, and I'll try to add the modification part also. So it's basically this one. I'll try to add the modification part also, and I'll just paste it here at the bottom, and I'll just take this. Let me run it. So you can see it has not changed. Let's say if I do getter, so list and immutable record, do getter, and I'll change it. Still, it should not change. You can see an unmodifiable or unsupported operation exception. So at line 18, because we are trying to modify a collection which is created using unmodifiable list. So this will make sure that once the object is created, that will be immutable. So I hope you got it. This is one way you can create immutable objects using Java records. It will avoid a lot of boilerplate code. So if you use collection, you can go for this. Okay. And this list.copy of you can use here also, like same place, like instead of this, you can do list.copy of here also. That is another way you can do it. List.copy of. Um, and you don't, I mean, you can return this as it is. You don't need to create new of. And I can just show you. So you got the same exception. What it says is like it's not supported. So it is basically create an unmodifiable list and we are trying to modify. So main advantage with records, right? You don't need to have a lot of things like constructor, you don't need getters, you don't need. So even the toString method also you don't need. Equals hash code is also taken internally. And even you don't need to explicitly declare an attribute like this. It is part of basically a record declaration itself. So you don't need to make it as private static final, or you don't need to make it as final record. So everything is automatically taken care. So it's one of the best way to create an immutable object. So I hope you got it. So we understood the different ways to create the immutable class. Let's move on to the next question. So why we need an immutable object? That's very much important because many of the times what will happen is we'll be using string always, but we'll not be aware why we need an immutable object like string. So one is thread safety, like as we discussed, right? Once the object is created, so it can't be changed. If you change, it will create a new object altogether. So it's a thread safety and caching and performance. So since it is not changing, so let's say it is stored and it is like kind of cached also. It is stored in string. Let's take an example of string. It's stored in string pool. It is kind of cached so that performance also optimized and the retrieval. So it ensures data integrity. Let's say if some password or something is created, nobody can tamper it or change it. And it is uh, easier to debug because once it is created, right, there is no change in its value. So the state is expected. There is no unexpected state change happens. And this is very good to create basically hash code because hash map expects key to be immutable so that the hash code value will not change. If you make it mutable, then what will happen is hash code value can change. So you can't retrieve the previously stored value using that key. And it supports functional programming and security benefits as we discussed, like unauthorized modification is not possible. And examples are string, integer, big decimal, all these things are immutable in nature. So main thing is thread safety and accidental modification we can avoid, and it is especially suitable for hash map to use it as a key. I hope you got it. So does Java support multiple inheritance? That's a good question. So when Java was started, right, one of the things they told they will not support the multiple inheritance because in C++ the multiple inheritance was leading to diamond shape problem. So if you don't know diamond shape problem, I would recommend maybe you can go and check it out. It's like one class, it is inherited by two more classes, and if there is one more class which is inheriting these two, so then there is kind of overlap because from this base class these two are inherited the functionality, and when this child class inheriting these two, so then there is a overlap functionality, it leads to diamond shape problem. So does Java support multiple inheritance? It is like yes or no kind of a answer. So multiple inheritance with classes, no. Java will not support multiple inheritance with classes because only one class we can extend. As we discussed in diamond shape, what is happening is there is one base class, there are two child class, and there is one more child class which can extend these two in C++. But in Java, since it is allowed to extend only one class, it is not supported. But with interface, yes, it is possible. So it's basically allows multiple inheritance. So in case of interface, like a class can extend these interfaces, two interfaces it can extend. So it is in a way it supports multiple inheritance. Little while ago we discussed a problem where if the same method name is present in the two interfaces, which class is implementing, we discuss what are the implications. So that is a good example for multiple inheritance using interface. In case of records also, like it can only basically implement the multiple interfaces. It cannot extend any other class. And in case of sealed class, basically it will restrict the classes which can inherit. And even sealed class also will not support the multiple inheritance. So I hope you got it. This is very comprehensive. Okay, these kind of answers you will not get in any other tutorials because we have covered concepts till the latest version of Java. That's why repeatedly I'm telling, watch till the end. If you have some questions, ask in the comment section. Like this video so that it will motivate us to create some more videos. And if you want this whole interview material, I'll share the link in the description, which will contain some more questions, which will be definitely helpful for your Java interviews. Let's move on to the next question. So what is the difference between interface and abstract class? This is one of the interesting questions. Till Java 7, there was one certain set of behaviors. After Java 7, some behaviors are changed. Let's understand in detail. So till Java 7, right, interface were containing only abstract methods. But after Java 7, it started supporting default and static methods. So in case of abstract class, it supports both abstract and concrete methods. You're clear on that. So Java 8 onwards, basically with respect to methods, there is not much difference between interface and abstract class. It's almost same. So mainly interface was like designed to enforce some behavior on the implementations, on the classes which are implementing. So that is the main intent of interfaces. So in abstract class, the main original design was like it was providing some common functionalities as a concrete method and some functionalities as an abstract method which can be overridden, which are specific to each child class. So that's why abstract class were designed initially. And fields wise, if you see, right, all the interface fields are public, static, final. means constants, but in case of abstract class, it can be constant or it cannot be constant. And inheritance, there is no constructor. Abstract class can have constructors. And access modifiers. So all the methods of interface are public in nature. So methods with abstract class, it can have a like public, private, protected access modifiers. Multiple inheritance. This is one of the main difference still exists. So interface supports multiple inheritance, but abstract class will not support the multiple inheritance. And usage. It is used for defining the contract, like what class should do. So in case of abstract class, as we discussed, right, it is used for some behaviors which are common is kept at the parent class level, abstract class level, and some specific behaviors are made it as abstract. Common behaviors are made as concrete methods. I hope you understood. Let's move on to the next question. So can a thread return values? This is very much interesting, okay? Because many of the times what will happen is we use threads always, but do we know whether thread can return any values? Maybe we'll try to understand this with an example. So the question is, can a thread return some value? This is an interesting question, okay? So normally what will happen is we have used threads in multiple places, but returning a value, right? That's not a very regular use case. Let's say here, right? If I implement, so you can see the signature is void. So which means this can't return anything. So I can't add any return statement here. So then how to return something from the thread? That's an interesting question. So in order to return something from thread, right, what we have to do is we have to use callable. So let's see that example. So here we can see we have a callable. Uh, Callable has, so here I'm making it as integer because I'm passing it here. Basically, by default, callable returns an object. So you can specify what kind of object return. So I'm specifying integer here. So this is my declaration. I'm returning it. So I'm using an executor service and I'm submitting my callable here. And when I do future.get, it returns the result and I'm printing it here. So I'll just run and show the result to you. So you can see it is returning one. So what it means is callable, if you use, you can return something from thread. This is an interesting one. Let's say I want to throw something here, throw some exception. So this is also possible. Okay. But let's say in case of runnable, let's say if I do throws exception, it will get an error. So you can see a run basically clashes. It does not throw anything. Okay. But callable can throw an exception also, which can be caught in the caller and we can take some action. I hope you got it. So if you want to return something from the thread, it should be like you have to use callable and with the corresponding return type in the callable declaration here so that you can use that as a return type. I hope it's clear for you. So we got the answer. Yes, it is possible with callable and future combination instead of runnable. Let's go for next question. So next question is, can functional interface contains more than one abstract, static, and default methods? So before we answer this question, right, first we have to understand what is functional interface. Functional interface means it can contain only one abstract method. That is the definition of functional interface. And this functional interface can be implemented using Lambda. Normally, that's a way we will basically use function interface to implement the Lambda. So it's basically helpful to come up with a functional style coding.
So these are all the basics about function interface. Let's try to understand with an example here. Here you can see, right, I have a function interface called my function interface, an abstract method, and I have added default and static methods. It's working fine, and the function interface contains an annotation called at the rate function interface. Let us say if I add another abstract method, so I'll call it as, maybe just for lack of better naming, abstract method 1. So what will happen is you can see an error here. So it will clearly says multiple non-overriding abstract methods found in the interface, which means functional interface will not allow more than one basically abstract methods. I hope it's clear for you. You can see it's like it can contain exactly one abstract method. So it can contain any number of default and static methods. That is perfectly fine. I hope you got it. Many of the times what will happen is candidates will be sure on the abstract method. They'll say there is only one abstract method we can have. But when interviewer asks, can it contain default and static methods? They'll get confused. Some people say no, some people say yes. So they will not be able to come up with the correct answer. I hope it's clear for you now. Let's see the answer and move on to the next question. So answer we have already discussed. It can contain only one abstract method. It can contain any number of static and default methods. So next question is, can functional interface extend another interface? So this is an interesting question. Okay, normally we will not think about this because we'll not use it in a day-to-day coding. So let's try to understand this with an example. The question is, can function interface extend the another interface? It can be function interface or non-function interface also. Let's try to understand with examples. Okay, this is a variant where here the base functional interface, right, you can contain only one abstract method, which is following the function interface criteria, and the derived interface is extending the base interface. There is no additional abstract method here. This is perfectly fine because this interface is containing only one abstract method that is coming from the base interface, which is perfectly fine. No additional abstract method. It can contain default static. So this is a valid combination. I hope you understood. So if a function interface extends another function interface, if the derived interface does not contain an abstract method, then it is possible. Let's try to understand the next case. So here, right, there is already one abstract method in the base function interface, and there is one in the derived also. So here it is not possible because when this derived is extending the base, so when this derived is extending the base, what is happening is this derived is getting two abstract method, one from the parent and one is already present in this interface also. So this is an invalid combination. Let's try to explore same thing with regular interface. It's the same case holds good. Let's go to here. So let's say if it is a regular one, I'm just removing this. So if it is a regular one, then also if it just contains one abstract method, then it is perfectly allowed. In case of invalid also same thing. If I remove this, so if there is one abstract in this, and if I try to extend, and if there is already one more in the derived, then it violates. But let's say instead of this, if there is a static, say static void, and let's call it as static method just for example, and this contains maybe just a sysout static method. So this is perfectly fine because the base interface is not containing any abstract methods. Just the child interface or derived interface contains it. So which is not violating the principle. I hope you understood the different cases clearly. I'm giving examples for most of the questions because this has to be registered in your mind. Because if you just read the answers, right, many of the times you may not be able to recall. If you write and practice and understand the concept, then only you can answer well. So let's see the answer. So the answer is function interface can extend another interface with following condition. Function interface can extend regular interface without any abstract methods. The regular interface should not contain any abstract methods. And function interface can extend another function interface if the derived interface does not contain an abstract method, which is already discussed with examples. I hope it's very clear.